And welcome back, class, to Season 2 of True and Accurate History. This season, the Mongols, led by Temujin, better known as Genghis Khan. Just a quick overview of what the Mongols have available to them. They have the Keshik, which is a sort of like a knight. They also have the Khan, which is sort of like a general, but better. So, let's get started on the road to Mongol domination. The first Mongol city was Karakorum, founded in 4000 BC. Now, these soldiers here are actually fairly important. They're led by a man named Turfan, who was Genghis Khan's earliest and most trusted lieutenant. He sent Turfan and his explorers out north to find out what the rest of the world held, and they very quickly found Nebuchadnezzar, the ruler of Babylon, just to the north of them. More explorers were sent out to see what was going on to the south and east and west, just to find out what the lay of the land was. They found some ruins of even older civilizations, and they learned that they were living in the unforgiving land which would come to be called the steppe, or the plains, as we more often call them today. India was discovered, as was the Ottoman Empire, all within a fairly short distance of the Mongol capital. The very first engagement took place between Turfan and barbarians on the coast north and west of Karakorum. They handled themselves admirably, and moved immediately on to destroy the remaining barbarians. The scouts to the southeast weren't quite so lucky. They lacked the ability to deal with barbarians, and instead continued to look for the lay of the land, while Turfan's group up in the north healed themselves as much as they could to prepare for the continued exploration in the name of Temujin. Meanwhile, in Karakorum, soldiers were being trained, and the explorers were looking at the boundaries of India. Temujin began his road to glory by instilling in his soldiers the idea of honor, the idea of martial prowess. And Turfan was out demonstrating just how important that martial prowess was, defeating barbarians left and right, crushing their encampments, and showing the world the power of the Mongols. Now, in these early days, life was fairly quiet, in the city at least, and Genghis Khan dealt with this by holding daily tournaments, in which the strongest citizens could compete against each other and determine who would lead the next expedition. Turfan's group returned to Karakorum, but were immediately replaced by a new set of fresh warriors and sent back out, once more under Turfan, who, despite having just come back from his long expedition, proved his martial prowess by defeating everyone in that day's tournament without even rest, and set off again the next day to explore the west coast. More barbarians were discovered near a city-state called Monaco, and Turfan's group quickly went to deal with them. Workers found horses, and an idea grew in Temujin's mind. If these animals could be domesticated, could not he and his soldiers and his warriors, men of the Mongol Empire, ride out and conquer those neighbors who lived nearby? They seemed weak after all, and he had no desire to submit to any of that nauseating diplomacy which the rest of the world demanded. Turfan headed back north past Babylon, and in Karakorum, Genghis Khan himself worked on domesticating the horses and learning to ride with them. The explorers heading north ran into trouble pretty quickly, and Turfan's group tried to reach them in time to defeat yet another barbarian encampment and clear a way for the explorers. They managed to make it just before the explorers died. Turfan's group continually ran into others from other nations who sought to demonstrate their strength, but none of them were quite so fearsome as he and his pack of warriors. They proved again and again their skill, their strength, and their power. The explorer, with the way cleared, headed further north, while Turfan retreated from the archers to rest. Unfortunately, the explorers ran into yet another band of barbarians and were killed before Turfan could arrive to help. India tried to open up diplomatic ties with Genghis Khan early, perhaps having witnessed the strength of the Khan and seeking some protection, as he was a peaceful man leading a peaceful nation. India clearly had no dreams of expansion, like Genghis Khan did. He soon discovered another pair of city-states, Florence and Tyre, to the east. This is a different Florence from the one that we saw on the other end of the world, don't worry. And a golden age dawned in 1760 BC. People were so proud that Genghis Khan had domesticated horses and learned to ride that they celebrated his name over and over in the city of Karakoram. While other civilizations were already building new cities, Genghis Khan had no such ambitions yet. His plan was expansion through conquest. But first he had to deal with the barbarian hordes who lived in the north. Their tactic of attacking with superior numbers gave him an idea, and soon he began sketching the plans for his own horde, the Mongol horde. In his mind, it would be made up of men on horseback, bravely riding out, bravely conquering, destroying, pillaging the other cities of those who lived nearby, especially the expansive Ottoman Empire. And yes, the Mongol horde became his dream, as more and more men learned how to ride horses, mounted up, and rode out to fight the barbarians and gain experience and strength and skill. Meanwhile, in Karakoram, people were beginning to think about things in terms beyond the simple corporeal. In the north, Turfan was preparing to take out a particularly entrenched northern tundra barbarian encampment. The horsemen in the west were making short work of theirs. In the city, people were beginning to come up with ideas of religion, life after death, faith, and the meaning of existence. Genghis Khan encouraged this, but with one caveat. His main interest was in promoting martial strength. So people were welcome to consider all they wanted, the meaning of life and why are we here, so long as their conclusions suited him. The conclusion he sought was that they were here to conquer the world, to spread their strength to the entire earth, and create a civilization in which strength was the only valued currency. To that end, the first Mongol horde made its way up towards the Babylonian Empire's secondary city of Akkad. Turfan in the north, destroying those barbarians. That was in fact the last time that Turfan was heard from. He knew that in the south, at Akkad, war had been declared on Nebuchadnezzar. The Mongol horde attacked their first city. They found that their horsemen were not the most suited to the task, but Genghis Khan demanded that they push through. Temujin told them if they could not take the city, they would be executed when they returned home anyway. At this time, seeing the disarray of his forces, he sent out a Khan to help them. One of his specially trained officers, personally trained in the arts of war by Temujin himself. As he made his way up towards Akkad, the horsemen there attempted to deal with the warriors of Babylon who fought desperately, while at the same time attempting to make an entry into the city. Meanwhile, Turfan came under attack from a strange thing floating on the water and shooting arrows. He had no idea how to deal with it, so he had to retreat for a time being. The Mongol horsemen did the same, waiting for the Khan's backup. Turfan rested in the north, preparing to head down towards Akkad to sweep in with a pincer movement and aid the horsemen. It was at this time that Genghis Khan implemented the warrior code, and the Khan finally made his way up to Akkad. This Khan was Guyuk Khan, the first of Genghis Khan's lieutenants, at least of his horseback lieutenants. Unlike Turfan, Guyuk worked alone and was an officer trained in the tactics that Genghis Khan had devised for the conquering of a city. With his help, the Mongol horsemen made swift work of Akkad's defenders before concentrating on the city. You can see here, in 800 BC, they're making their first press in towards the city after having dealt with at least half the defenders. This is a tense time for Genghis Khan, his first conquest. How would it go? What would be the result? Babylonian warriors try to fight their way through the horsemen but are unable to make it. And at last, after a little bit of organizational shuffling, to move the freshest troops up towards the city so that they could break through the walls. And we see up here Turfan coming under attack by Babylon, trying to make his way around the outskirts. And here, horse warriors, waiting for a moment, waiting for the right moment to strike into Akkad and take the city. Turfan is stuck between yet another barbarian encampment and the warriors of Babylon. This time the great library was built in Karakorum, where they had been gathering all the information about how to wage war into one place. As they did this, they learned new tactics and techniques for defeating enemies, sieging cities, and defending their own cities. Tactics used by ancient civilizations which no longer existed, but which had once sprawled across the entirety of the planet. Nebuchadnezzar begged for peace in 675, but Genghis Khan was having none of it. It was in that year that Turfan made his last stand, just west of Babylon, where the horsemen were even then making their way. Unfortunately, he was not able to rendezvous with them in time, and Turfan and his entire team died. Even so, a courier managed to make his way back, bringing with him a bow and arrow that had been used by the warriors, the barbarians in the north. Genghis Khan used this, turned it over to his armsmen, and figured out how to turn it into a weapon. Another Khan was born, but he stayed near Karakorum to guard against potential attack by India or the Ottoman Empire, who were growing restless hearing of the conquest in the north of Babylon. The horsemen conserved their strength, as per Guyuk Khan's orders, and began to ready themselves for a full-out assault on Babylon, to crush the civilization entirely and make more room in which they could live, gain more subjects, more slaves, more people to train into warriors if they were strong enough. Babylon came under siege in 525 BC. With Guyuk Khan's orders and commands, and the horsemen of Mongolia battling their way up, it did not take long for Babylon to become deeply weakened in the face of the Khan's assault. Akkad, newly captured, continued to deal with the spies of the enemy, but it was in that same year that the horsemen experienced their first loss, and that same time, spurred by their anger for revenge, that they finally conquered Babylon and executed Nebuchadnezzar II. The first step on the road to conquest had been completed successfully. Genghis Khan had learned a great deal about how to wage war on cities. The horsemen had been blooded. Guyuk Khan had had his first experience of true command, and it was time to take on the world. Till next time, all the best.